What if you didn't just live one life, but every life in human history? From the first breath of Homo sapiens in the African dawn to the digital pulse of the modern world, imagine being reborn as every person who ever lived. Each time you die, you awaken again. Hunter, farmer, scribe, sailor, rebel, inventor. In this untold history journey, you'll travel across 300,000 years of humanity, not as an observer, but as its beating heart. You'll feel the tools in your hand, the war in your chest, the code beneath your fingertips. By the end, you may see history and yourself in a way you never imagined. Stay with us until the end of the video to face the question only you can answer. How will you shape the future lives of humanity? Chapter 1: First Dawn. You awaken in the rust-colored soil of a sun-scorched plain, beneath a sky that stretches wider than memory. There are no names for anything yet. Not for the mountains in the distance, the trembling grass at your feet, or the hunger in your belly. But you feel all of it. You are the first of your kind to open your eyes as Homo sapiens. Your hands grasp not out of instinct alone, but with a flicker of intention. The stone in your palm is not just a rock. It is a tool sharpened by careful strikes, shaped by the trial and error of ancestors you can no longer name. Around you are others, few in number, yet bound by firelight and the thrill of surviving another day. You do not speak with words yet, only with glances and gestures, but already something different stirs within you. Awareness, and the whisper of something future generations will call thought. Your first life ends abruptly, not far from where it began. You fall to disease or injury, forgotten by time. Yet when the world blinks again, you are reborn, not forward, but backward. You are now the second human to live, walking the earth with no memory of your past, yet shaped subtly by what came before. You walk the same ground, but this time your hand finds a stone faster. Your group gathers food more efficiently. You craft a sharper spear. You live longer. Life repeats, but with variation. You die again, and again you return, this time as the third, then the fourth, the fifth. Through countless incarnations, you walk barefoot across deserts, forests, and grasslands. You chase antelope and flee lions. You laugh, bleed, suffer, and starve. Every action, no matter how small, echoes forward into your future selves. You do not know that you've lived before, but your hands remember. Your instincts grow sharper, your people more capable. Centuries slip by unnoticed as you flicker from body to body, face to face. Sometimes you are strong and proud, a hunter who feeds many. Sometimes you are weak and frail, forgotten in the shadows of your camp. But each life, no matter how brief, pushes the human story forward. Fire becomes more than heat, it becomes ritual. It burns at the heart of every gathering, offering protection, light, and meaning. One day, in one life, you notice that the embers crack in rhythm with your breath. In another, you trace a pattern in the ash and realize it holds the memory of movement. Across these countless rebirths, you help your people hunt mammoth, gather berries, defend against predators, and begin to wonder, quietly, about the sky. You do not yet have gods, but you have awe. A storm no longer only frightens you. Sometimes you kneel before it, and in that kneeling, something eternal begins to grow. You live through the slow blooming of language, not overnight, not in a single life, but across lifetimes where each generation invents and remembers just a little more. First come the grunts, then the gestures, then the shared names for things you all fear and love. Fire, food, blood, sky. The meanings ripple forward into every version of yourself. Some lives you spend as a child mimicking your elder's words. In others, you become the elder, teaching what you learned from someone long gone. In each life, your group grows a little more bonded, a little more aware of itself. Language allows memory to take form beyond instinct. Stories begin to replace silence. Around campfires, you hear tales of animals, stars, and ancestors, sometimes real, often not. But it doesn't matter. You believe, and belief becomes a tool just as powerful as stone or fire. Comforts. It organizes. It guides. Your people begin to see themselves not just as survivors, but as something chosen, something enduring. As you return again and again, your lifetimes spread farther across the land. One cycle, you are born near the savannah, the next high in the mountains, then along a fertile riverbed. With each rebirth, your feet walk unfamiliar paths, but your hands build the same shelters, hunt the same beasts, raise the same children. You learn to predict the seasons. You begin to follow the rhythms of herds. Your tools change: obsidian tips, bone needles, woven baskets. You learn to trap, to dry meat, to store what you cannot eat. Survival becomes more than daily instinct. It becomes planning, a vision of tomorrow. And with that vision comes something deeper. You start marking time, a scratch on a bone, a stone aligned with the sun. You don't know why you mark it, but you know it matters. You are not just living anymore. You are remembering. And through remembrance, your people begin to stretch beyond the present moment. Not every life is full of progress. Sometimes you are lost to fever or childbirth. Sometimes your group collapses in conflict or starvation. But other times you thrive. You lead or love or invent something that others carry forward. You never recall these moments in your next life, but the world remembers for you. You wake up into slightly better odds, a better spearhead, a shelter that leaks less, a song sung by a mother who once heard it from a grandmother in a life you used to live. In this way, you are always moving forward, even as you start over each time. The forest becomes more familiar, the sky more readable, the animals more predictable. You are still hunted, but you have begun to hunt time itself. You track the seasons. You map migration routes in your mind. You bury your dead in deliberate places, not just out of convenience, but with meaning. And meaning, once born, never truly dies. Eventually, you begin to paint, not as an artist might today, but as a witness. Deep in the walls of caves, you leave your mark. Hands in ochre, shapes of animals, dots, spirals, symbols whose meaning you never fully explain but always feel. The cave becomes a sacred place, visited by many versions of you across centuries. In one life, you are the child who wonders what it means. In another, you are the shaman who adds your own handprint. These images outlast your fragile bodies. They persist through flood and flame. Even thousands of years later, when you are reborn into lives that speak new languages and worship new gods, you return to those same walls and feel something stir. The paintings do not speak, but they remember. They are you and you are them. Through them, your story becomes permanent. Even without written words, your people learn to pass ideas through symbols and silence. Your body becomes more adapted to this life, this land, this rhythm. In some lifetimes, you run farther, climb faster, breathe deeper. In others, you are born different, slower, smaller, yet just as full of wonder. Each version of you teaches and learns. You become both hunter and healer, parent and child, teacher and student. You sit at the edge of lakes and wonder why the moon ripples. You chase shadows in the trees and assign them names. Curiosity becomes your compass. Your people begin to shape their world not just with tools, but with questions. Why does fire fall from the sky? Why does life leave the body? Why do some plants heal while others kill? In this endless cycle of lives, the world becomes less of a threat and more of a puzzle. You begin to see patterns where others see chaos. You do not always understand, but the act of asking is enough to change everything. You begin to change the land itself. In one life, you pile stones to mark a trail. In another, you dig pits to trap game. Someone you once were finds a plant that grows well near water. Someone you will be remembers that and tends it. Over hundreds of lives, you nudge the wild into order. You still hunt, but you also gather, and now you begin to plant. You test seeds. You notice what grows when. Your hands press grains into soil. Your feet tread the same paths again and again. You are not yet a farmer, not fully, but you are no longer only chasing what the land offers. You are beginning to shape it. This change is slow, scattered, uncertain, but it is real, and you feel its pull. The rhythm of the hunt gives way to the rhythm of the seasons. Births begin to outnumber deaths. Families stay in one place longer. The roots of civilization take hold. The clans you are born into grow larger. No longer just small groups wandering through brush and valley. Now they settle for a time. Return to familiar camps. Build better shelters. You see the first flickers of leadership, of laws, of customs that stretch beyond a single generation. Stories are told not just to pass time, but to pass down meaning. Roles begin to form: healers, toolmakers, firekeepers, dreamers. You play them all across different lives. You die in some trying to protect others. You live in others because someone once taught you how to treat a wound or store food in bark. The human tribe becomes more than survival. It becomes culture. With each rebirth, you inherit more than instincts. You inherit memory, tradition, and a slow-growing blueprint for something greater. You may not know it yet, but you are laying the foundation for cities, rituals, temples, and nations. Still thousands of years away, but already breathing. The world around you begins to feel smaller, not because it has shrunk, but because you've walked so much of it across so many lives. You know where the sun rises. You've seen where rivers flood. You've smelled the coming of rain before it falls. In one life, you lead your group through a difficult winter. In another, you watch a child survive because of something you once did. The collective human mind is growing. Not just yours, but everyone's. Across Africa, groups are sharing more, fighting less, forming the earliest threads of trade and language that span vast regions. You are no longer alone in your awareness. You are part of something massive and rising, something ancient yet newborn with each generation. You feel it in your bones, that you are near a threshold, that the life you live now is part of something that will never again turn back. You have not yet planted a field, but you are standing at its edge. In your final life of this chapter, you awaken near a riverbed where the soil is soft and fertile. This life feels different. Your hands move with purpose. Your group stays longer in one place. You begin to shape the land not just out of need, but out of vision. You dig shallow trenches, gather seeds in baskets, watch the sprouting of something no human has yet mastered. For the first time, food comes to you instead of you chasing it. You sleep through the night without fear of starvation. Your people have not yet named this revolution, but you feel it taking root. Something new is beginning. The dawn that once only lit the path to survival now lights the path to creation. And as your body returns to the earth one last time, you sense it, not as a memory, not as a thought, but as a truth. You are leaving the age of the wild behind. The first dawn has ended. But before we continue, let me know if you're enjoying this kind of long, gentle history. Feel free to tap that like button and subscribe, only if you truly love what I'm doing here. And in the comments, share where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your city. I always love seeing our little bedtime crew gathering from every corner of the world. Now, lower your lights. Maybe let a soft fan hum in the background and settle in. Let's proceed with tonight's quiet journey together. Chapter 2: Seeds of Civilization. You return to the world not as a hunter under open skies, but as a farmer beneath a rising sun. The land around you is strange, flatter, warmer, dotted with distant hills and long rivers that carve the ground like veins. This is the Fertile Crescent, where the wild grasses shimmer golden and something ancient begins to take root. You are no longer chasing herds. You are watching plants grow. Your feet are caked in mud from irrigation ditches dug by hand, and your arms ache from grinding grain on stone slabs. This is a new kind of life. It is slower, repetitive, and bound to the earth beneath you. Yet it promises stability. In this life, your children eat bread made from wheat you once planted. In the next, they build clay houses along the same fields. A rhythm forms, deeper than the hunt. You do not roam. You remain. And in your stillness, civilization finds its first heartbeat. As you return in new bodies, generation after generation, the wild retreats farther each time. Forests are cut to make way for crops. Rivers are guided by canals. Where once you wandered freely, you now mark boundaries with stones and fences. Fields spread, then villages. In one life, you build a house with your hands. In another, you are born into one. Mud bricks replace animal hides. Walls rise. Roofs hold against the rain. You learn to store grain in baskets sealed with pitch. You tame animals, goats for milk, oxen for labor, dogs for protection. Your world shrinks, yet fills with new complexities. Schedules tied to the stars. Rituals for planting and harvest. In one lifetime, you lead a planting ceremony with chants remembered from a life long gone. In another, you fall sick from grain rot. Farming brings new blessings and new curses. You are full more often, but your back aches, and your life is no longer your own. In early lifetimes, you rise with the sun and sleep with the stars. But now, even time is shifting. In the village square, a man carves moons into a stone wheel. He counts them, trying to capture the rhythm of seasons. In one life, you pass him daily without notice. In another, you are him. The calendar is born, not perfectly, but with intent. And with it comes order. Work is divided. Roles become fixed. Some fetch water. Others mill flour. A few begin to lead. The first hierarchies form not by force, but by necessity. Someone must store the grain. Someone must decide how it is shared. First, it is fair. Then it is not. Power accumulates in ways that feel new. In one life, you are at the top guarding the silos. In another, you beg for a handful of barley from a man who once served you. The land is generous, but people are learning to hoard its gifts. As villages grow into clusters of homes and shared fire pits, something new appears: walls. Not just for protection from wild animals, but from other people. You awaken in lifetimes marked by tension. Neighbors squabble over land. One year, your fields flood while there's dry. The next, they accuse you of sorcery when the harvest fails. You begin to see the first glimmers of conflict that extend beyond the hunt. Raids, feuds, theft. Yet alongside violence, something else grows: cooperation. You build granaries together. You dig deeper canals, linking farms in webs of shared effort. You gather in meeting places to settle disputes. In one life, you help build the first stone shrine. In another, you kneel before it, whispering hopes to the unknown. These places are simple, just raised platforms or carved stones, but they bind people in shared purpose. Gods are born, not as creators, but as protectors of harvests. You believe because believing helps order the chaos. In this world of gathering crowds and structured roles, your hands are no longer your only tools. You begin to shape clay into tablets, carving marks that stand for numbers, then for objects, then for names. Writing does not come all at once. It is born from ledgers, lists of grain and laborers, trades and debts. In one life, you scratch meaningless symbols into the dirt. In the next, they mean something. You become the keeper of accounts. The marks you make shape who eats and who waits. You no longer need to remember everything. The clay remembers for you. Writing allows knowledge to endure beyond a single life, a single voice. In later lifetimes, you are taught by others who read what you once wrote centuries earlier. It is not just stories or law. It is memory, passed down not through blood, but through symbols. Your mind expands beyond the moment. Now, even death cannot erase your impact. Farming brings stability, but it also brings monotony. You begin to feel the weight of repetition. Life in the fields is hard. Sunburnt days, cracked hands, crops that fail too easily. Your days are no longer shaped by instinct or movement, but by obligation. In some lives, you escape this cycle by becoming a craftsman. You shape pottery, tan leather, smelt copper. In others, you remain in the fields, watching artisans walk past while you tend rows of barley. A division grows not just of labor, but of worth. Those who make art, tools, weapons begin to stand apart. They trade their goods in marketplaces that swell with sound and scent. Cities are beginning to form, not as grand capitals, but as hubs of people who no longer live only for survival. You walk through crowded streets where every corner holds something unfamiliar. You are no longer alone in your efforts. Humanity is converging, pooling its knowledge and its burdens. In the deepest part of the valley, rivers are harnessed in ways your earliest lives could never imagine. In this life, you help dig channels with bronze tools. In the next, you manage the schedule of when each field gets water. Irrigation becomes more than a solution. It becomes a system, a contract between neighbors, a measure of power. Whoever controls the flow of water controls the village. You see how nature is no longer just endured, it is governed. In flood seasons, you give thanks. In droughts, you plead with officials who once sat beside you as equals. Hierarchies harden. Titles appear. Priest, scribe, overseer. You feel the shift. Farming has freed time, and that time now builds authority. You are still reborn as many kinds of people, rich and poor, free and bound. But the world you return to each time feels more rigid. The rules of nature are now joined by the rules of man, written in stone and enforced by others. In some lives, you rise high, born into the homes of those who command land and people. You wear fine linen and eat from clay bowls painted with distant symbols. You no longer toil. You manage. You speak decisions while others bend to them. But in other lives, you return as the ones who carry baskets of wet earth, press grain into jars, sweep courtyards where you once sat in comfort. You see both sides, and you learn how systems grow self-serving. Those at the top believe they deserve their place. Those at the bottom are told it is their fate. Yet rebellion brews always quietly. In one life, you run from the fields and vanish into the hills. In another, you whisper stories of a time before walls, before rules. You wonder if the promise of farming was too costly. The drudgery of fixed fields begins to press against the soul. But still, every morning you rise. You work. You endure. As cities grow, your lifetimes cross paths with the unknown. Traders arrive from distant valleys, bearing stones you've never seen and fabrics dyed in colors that shimmer in the sun. Language begins to twist and merge. You learn words from strangers and teach them your own. You trade goats for salt, wheat for obsidian. You realize the world is larger than your river, your city, your gods. In one life, you journey far and settle elsewhere. In another, you are the foreigner who arrives with strange customs. Yet, despite differences, the core remains the same. All want food, shelter, protection. You find comfort in this unity. Shared meals with strangers. Laughter without common words. Civilization is no longer one place. It is an idea spreading across valleys and mountains. You have helped build it not in one life but in countless ones. Each brick laid, each seed sown, each word spoken was another step, and still the path stretches onward. One day, you awaken to a world that is louder, busier, more ordered than any you have known. Streets are straight, markets are full. Rulers sit on platforms above crowds. You stand among them, shoulder to shoulder with others who wear symbols of rank or trade. You belong to something larger now, a people, a nation, perhaps even an early state. Laws are etched in stone. Soldiers march in rhythm. Temples rise toward the sky. In some lives, you worship there. In others, you build them. Civilization has become self-aware. It preserves its memory through archives and monuments. It celebrates itself through rituals and festivals. It defends its progress through walls and war. You, who once ran barefoot through wild grasses, now live under rules crafted by unseen hands. Some of these rules protect, others oppress, but all are born from the seeds you once planted. Civilization, like a great tree, grows from simple roots, and now its branches cast long shadows. In your final life of this chapter, you return as a child born into a thriving town, where oxen pull carts and children play in courtyards shaped by design. You eat bread made from grains farmed by hands not your own. You wear clothes dyed with techniques passed down for centuries. You attend rituals where names are chanted, names you once carried. The world around you is stable but never still. Whispers speak of new lands beyond rivers. Some dream of conquest, others of trade. You stand at the edge of the old and the new, where farming has reached its peak and is about to tip into something else, into states, cities, writing, empire. As your life ends, you do not sense the end of anything. You feel only momentum. You know now that the field is never just a field. It is the beginning of time, and soon that time will be measured not in seasons, but in kings and gods. Chapter 3: Empires and Ideas. You awaken beside a mighty river, its current slow and steady, its banks fertile and tamed by careful hands. This is not a village of mud-brick homes and scattered fields. This is Egypt, where order and ritual flow with the Nile. You rise each day to the rhythm of sun and flood, working land that no longer belongs to you alone. In one life, you haul stones to construct a tomb that pierces the sky. In another, you chart stars to guide the planting season. The gods you once feared from afar now wear crowns and walk among men. You serve them with offerings and silence. Your labor is no longer for survival alone. It fuels something vast, an empire. Temples rise like mountains. Laws are carved into stone. The dead are preserved in gold. You live and die in cycles of grandeur and devotion. Egypt teaches you how power endures when draped in eternity and wrapped in ritual. Elsewhere, in the land between two rivers, you return in lifetimes marked by the pulse of civilization. Mesopotamia, a place of mud and mathematics, becomes your home again and again. You witness the invention of the city of hierarchy, of time measured by the movement of shadows. In one life, you press symbols into wet clay, recording trade, taxes, and prayers. In another, you are sold in that ledger, your name reduced to a unit. Here, writing becomes the keeper of power. Armies form, kings rise, walls are built high enough to outlast memory, yet still fall to drought and war. You feel the tension between progress and collapse. For every tower you raise, another crumbles in fire. Yet you return again, each life bringing something new. You govern, you serve, you dream. You walk the streets of Ur, Babylon, Nineveh. Civilization no longer feels young, feels aged, cunning, and hungry. You are no longer building a future, you are maintaining an illusion. To the east, in the shadow of snowy peaks and winding rivers, you are reborn along the banks of the industry. The cities are planned, the bricks uniform, the drains complex. Feels quiet, almost anonymous. No towering statues or sprawling tombs, yet order flows in every wall, every well, every seal pressed into soft clay. In one life, you trade painted pottery in a bustling market. In another, you clean canals that carry waste away from homes. You do not know the names of your rulers. Few do. Power here does not scream, it hums. You feel more equal, more connected to your neighbors, yet more distant from the divine. There are no grand temples in your path, only small altars, simple figurines. But faith runs deep, rooted in fertility, cycles, and balance. You live many quiet lives here, barely remembered. Then, without warning, it ends. The river shifts. The rains fail. You awaken far away, with only a faint memory of vanished cities. Your journey takes you farther still, to the east, where the yellow river surges through valleys of lush soil. You are reborn among the ancient people of Shang China. The air tastes of ash and bronze. In one life, you cast ritual vessels adorned with dragons and thunder. In another, you burn turtle shells, reading the cracks as answers from your ancestors. Here, the past governs the present. Lineage is law. You bow not only to kings, but to generations long gone. You etch divinations in oracle bones, asking the spirits for guidance. Writing flows differently here. More art than record, more reverence than accounting. You see the beginning of a long thread, one that will stretch unbroken for millennia. The ancestors never leave. They shape your destiny. You feel less like an individual, more like a branch on a living tree. In this world, power is not just political, it is cosmic. Harmony is sacred, and you, again and again, are part of its rhythm. In each of these lands, across lifetimes scattered like seeds on the wind, you begin to notice something deeper forming. Ideas no longer stay in one village or kingdom. They travel, carried on the backs of traders and exiles, on papyrus scrolls and whispered legends. In one life, you help copy a text from Sumer to Canaan. In another, you hear a myth retold with a new god wearing an older name. Stories evolve. Languages mix. Faiths blend. Civilization no longer grows alone. Cross-pollinates. In temples and courts, in markets and schools, knowledge begins to accumulate. You live as a scribe in Thebes, a merchant in Mari, a priest in Mohenjo-Daro. You speak many tongues, yet chase the same truths. What is justice? What is death? Why do kings rise? Why do stars move? Your questions do not fade with each life. They deepen. You begin to understand that ideas, more than armies or walls, are what truly build empires. Over time, the gods you once feared become more familiar. They now have names, faces, rituals, stories. They demand sacrifice, loyalty, obedience. You are reborn into faiths that explain droughts, floods, eclipses. In one life, you sing hymns to Ra as dawn rises over lotus-filled waters. In another, you pour libations to Inanna beneath the flickering torches of a ziggurat. In a distant life, you perform rites to appease river spirits and household ancestors. The divine becomes a thread through every moment. But so does control. Temples grow richer. Priests wield power once reserved for kings. Religion no longer comforts only, it governs. In some lives, you believe deeply. In others, you doubt quietly. You begin to see how gods shape laws, how myths justify war, how sacred texts preserve hierarchy. You see how belief can unite a people or crush them. Yet through it all, you continue to worship. Not always the same gods, but always something beyond yourself. Centralized power grows hungrier with each lifetime. You are born into cities ruled by law codes chiseled in stone and upheld by sword and decree. In Babylon, you memorize Hammurabi's edicts. In Egypt, you learn the balance of Ma'at. In China, you bow to the mandate of heaven. Justice becomes institutional. Bureaucracy expands. In one life, you are a tax collector counting grain offerings. In another, you suffer under an edict designed to enrich a palace. Cities swell with workers, artisans, soldiers. Roads stretch farther. Currencies appear. Time becomes measured not just by stars, but by court calendars. You begin to feel distant from the earth, the sky, the seasons. You live not by nature's rhythm, but by decree. You see the rise of capital cities, courtly intrigue, standing armies. You no longer serve your clan or village. You serve a state, and the state, once an idea, now builds in stone and bronze. It endures even as its people change. But for all their glory, these empires break. You are reborn into lives where famine strips the fields, where foreign armies storm the walls, where temples are looted, libraries burned, kings beheaded. You see that power, once so eternal, is just as fragile as clay. In one life, you flee a collapsing dynasty. In another, you are captured by the very empire you once helped build. The gods fall silent. The priests vanish. What once seemed divine now crumbles under its own weight. You live through the fall of cities, Thebes, Akkad, Mohenjo-Daro. You wander through ruins where you once feasted. You feel the grief not just of one life, but of many. The lesson is clear. No matter how high humans build, nothing is immune to time. Yet in every fall, seeds remain. In broken tablets, you find poems. In scattered survivors, you find memory. Civilization is not erased, transforms, and you are always there to witness its rebirth. In quieter lives, you begin to reflect. What made these empires rise? Why did they fall? You notice that none were built by kings alone. They were built by hands like yours, carpenters, farmers, masons, scribes. You were the body of the empire even when you were never its voice. Yet now, with each rebirth, you grow more aware. You see the wheel turning. You watch leaders repeat mistakes. You begin to wonder if history is not a straight line, but a spiral. In one life, you try to resist a tyrant's tax. In another, you teach a student how the stars move, hoping truth might outlive cruelty. Slowly, the idea grows that empires are not just inherited, they are chosen, built, questioned. You no longer accept every crown as divine. You begin to ask not just how to live, but how to live better. These questions are dangerous, but they are yours, and they survive even when you do not. In one lifetime, you are born into a world that remembers the greatness of the past but struggles to match it. You walk through cities built on the bones of older civilizations. Statues stand broken. Temples house new gods. Old scripts are half understood. Yet ideas endure. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, myth. The knowledge of generations is never truly lost. In a dusty chamber, you find a scroll you once wrote. In a crowded market, you hear a story you once lived. Civilization is not a single light. It is sparks carried from place to place. And you, always returning, are its bearer. With each life, you carry a little more wisdom, a little more memory, even if you don't recall it. You are not just surviving history, you are helping shape it. You are the architect and the laborer, the storyteller and the listener, the ruler and the rebel. You are the thread that weaves the human story together, one fragile life at a time. And now, as one chapter closes, you awaken once more. Not in a palace or a field, but in motion. You are on a ship cutting across turquoise waves, or a caravan winding through desert paths. You feel wind, salt, sand. You are no longer bound to a single land or empire. You are moving across the map, trading goods, ideas, and memories. The world is growing smaller, its corners reaching toward each other. You don't know it yet, but you are entering a new age. An age not just of power and pyramids, but of connection. The empires behind you crumble into dust. But what comes next will shape minds, faiths, and journeys for centuries. As you take your first step into this next life, you do not look back. You look outward. Chapter 4: Age of Exchange. You awaken this time not beneath the shadow of empire, but beneath a rising sun that catches on the canvas of a caravan tent. The desert around you is vast, quiet, waiting. You are a merchant now, born into a life of movement. Each step in the sand echoes those of countless others, stretching from China to the Levant. Silk, spices, incense, and glass pass through your hands. In some lives, you ride with camel caravans through arid passes. In others, you load goods onto ships at Persian Gulf ports. The Silk Road is not one road, but many veins pulsing with trade and hope. You travel far, but your language, your dress, your gods begin to blur into the cultures you meet. With each transaction, you carry more than goods. You carry ideas, flavors, sounds. This is the beginning of something strange and new. Humanity, once isolated by mountain and sea, is beginning to hum with shared breath. The paths you travel are filled not just with wares but with stories. In one life, you ride beside a monk spreading a quiet faith born in India. In another, you listen to travelers describe a desert prophet's teachings sweeping through Arabia. Across generations, you begin to hear the names of new gods, new saviors, new revelations. Buddhism winds its way along mountain passes into China. Christianity sails with merchants to Africa's coast. Islam gallops across sand dunes into Spain. You live through it all. Sometimes you are the convert, sometimes the resistant elder, sometimes the child born into faiths shaped by ancestors you once were. These religions do not simply spread by force. They move in conversations, in translations, in shared meals along dusty roads. You witness their evolution, their divisions, their fervor. And in every faith, you see echoes of the ones before. The world is no longer spiritual in isolation. It is becoming spiritual in dialogue. You sail the Mediterranean in another life, born to a family of traders whose ancestors once fought in forgotten wars. The sea becomes your highway. You cross from Alexandria to Antioch, from Carthage to Constantinople. The salt wind carries more than cargo, it carries memory. Ancient ruins dot every coastline. You see the bones of empires beneath your feet, even as new ones rise above them. In one life, you help ferry papyrus scrolls filled with Greek philosophy. In another, you sell dyed cloth in a port teeming with languages. You come to understand that no culture is pure. Everything is borrowed, adapted, translated. One people's god becomes another's saint. One city's law becomes another's foundation. You no longer see yourself as belonging to a single place. You are a node in a vast network. You move not just with purpose, but with curiosity. The sea teaches you that difference does not divide, connects, creates, transforms you every time you cross. Far to the east, you live among mountains and volcanoes, reborn as a navigator under Pacific skies. Your canoe slices across open ocean, guided by stars and memory alone. In one life, you leave Samoa in search of a new island. In another, you arrive on the shores of Rapa Nui, greeted by statues that speak of ancient power. You learn to read waves like letters, to feel currents like whispers. You are not just crossing water. You are carrying plants, pigs, fire, stories. Polynesia is not a forgotten chapter of the world. It is one of its most astonishing. You live in islands where everything must be shared, everything remembered, or all is lost. Generations live in chants, in tattoos, in the carved beams of meeting houses. You understand time differently here, not in empires or years, but in journeys. You are not drifting. You are weaving a map across the sea, one life at a time, linking people once thought unreachable. You are reborn along the edge of the Sahara, where caravans stretch like insects across the dunes. In Timbuktu, you carry books, not goods but knowledge. You live as a scholar, translating Arabic texts into local tongues. You copy science, poetry, law. You build libraries out of clay and devotion. In another life, you are a camel driver, never reading the books you transport, but still part of their journey. This is not a dark continent. It is radiant with learning, trade, and faith. You watch kingdoms rise in gold and spirit. Ghana, Mali, Songhai. You walk among mosques that sing with calligraphy, streets paved with salt. Africa is not isolated. It pulses with the same currents as the Mediterranean and Arabia. You see that no part of the world exists alone. You are beginning to grasp the shape of global history, not a straight line but a web. You are no longer just a witness. You are a thread in the net. In the Americas, you return again, born along high ridges or within jungle cities. The Andes, the Yucatan, the Valley of Mexico, all alive with their own ideas. In one life, you help carve temples that honor feathered serpents. In another, you plant maize in a field once cleared by your ancestors. The Inca build roads with no wheels, the Maya chart stars without glass. The Mexica organize cities fed by floating gardens. These are not people waiting to be discovered. They are inventors of time itself, architects of order. You live through rituals shaped by celestial calendars, governed by gods who dance in eclipse and drought. Knowledge here moves in cycles, not lines. You see blood as sacrifice, not punishment. You see empire built on tribute, not taxation. You live in societies that rise without metal or the wheel, yet build cities that rival any you've seen. You begin to understand that genius is not born in one place. It is scattered everywhere. Afterward, you awaken in lifetimes filled with fresh winds and expanding maps. You ride with Mongol couriers galloping across steppes. You build ships in Chinese harbors that sail farther than ever before. You chart coasts in Mediterranean ports, seeking faster routes to familiar spice islands. In each life, the world feels smaller. In one, you see a map and recognize it. In another, you redraw it. You feel time speeding up. You live through conquests that erase cultures. But you also witness translations that preserve them. Persian poet is read in Spain. A Chinese invention is copied in Italy. You begin to realize that ideas are indestructible. You can burn a city but not a number system. You can silence a prophet but not a parable. You are no longer content with merely traveling. You want to understand. This is the dawn of curiosity, of questioning not just what is, but what could be. It will lead somewhere dangerous and beautiful. In later lives, you are caught between old world and new. You are born in coastal Africa as traders arrive with silver and muskets. You live in Calicut as fleets appear with sails stitched in foreign script. You sense something stirring, an imbalance. In one life, you are given beads for your spices. In another, your land is claimed by someone you have never met. Exploration becomes exploitation. Discovery becomes domination. You hear new languages shout orders you don't understand. You see diseases arrive again, but faster now, deadlier. Entire villages vanish. Empires once mighty are undone in decades. You realize you are entering an age not just of exchange, but of conquest at scale. The world is no longer just moving. It is accelerating. You are not always ready, but you are always there, living, witnessing, remembering. You feel something ending, but something else is coming. A storm of invention, of reason, of revolution. And once again, you step forward into it. You close this chapter with salt on your lips and dust on your boots. You have crossed continents without a passport, changed names without regret, died in cities that no longer exist. But with each life, you've built the invisible threads that bind the world. The age of exchange was never just about trade. It was about contact, messy, beautiful, violent, profound. It was about the realization that no one is truly isolated, that every idea, every object, every belief carries echoes from countless lives. You have been a monk and a merchant, a sailor and a slave, a scholar and a stranger. And now you are reborn once more. The sea is behind you. The compass is in your hand. Ahead lies a new world, one that believes it can remake everything, including the stars. You walk toward it without knowing what comes next, but knowing that history will never be still again. Chapter 5: Forge of Nations. You awaken in a city of soaring spires and scaffolding, fresh stones hungry for ornament. This is the Renaissance, where faith and art dance in stone and canvas. You are born as a craftsman's apprentice in Florence, learning to shape marble into human form. In another life, you sketch circles and squares on parchment, seeking perfect harmony. Ideas once bound to monasteries now spill into plazas. You feel the pulse of rebirth. Ancient texts rediscovered, perspective mastered, beauty redefined. You carve reliefs of myth alongside biblical scenes. You taste the promise of human potential awakening from medieval slumber. Patronage flows like river water, but so do rivalries and envy. You see fortunes made and lost in a single commission. You learn that creativity can topple old orders, but it can also be harnessed by them. In every life here, you sense the world shifting beneath your feet, as if humanity itself is learning to stand tall on newly straightened legs. In one life, you walk through sunlit cloisters, hearing the echoes of chanting monks. In the next, you stand before a pulpit where thunderous words crack the foundations of faith. This is the Reformation, an age of spiritual upheaval that will shape nations. You are born into a household that questions indulgences and priestly decree. You ink pamphlets and nail manifestos to wooden doors. You are hunted and hailed as heretic or hero. Across Europe, you witness the fragmentation of a once unified church. New congregations gather in simple halls rather than vaulted cathedrals. Wars erupt, treaties follow. Faith becomes a banner for princes. You see that belief can unite but also divide. You carry this tension within you, sometimes as solace, sometimes as burden. Yet even in conflict, you sense the power of individual conscience awakening from centuries of silence. You carry the flame of reform, uncertain whether it will brighten or consume. Then comes another awakening, one not spiritual but intellectual. You are reborn into an age of telescopes and microscopes. In one life, you grind lenses until the heavens reveal their hidden worlds. You chart Jupiter's moons and question the motion of Earth. In another, you peer at drops of pond water, discovering life in miniature. Science moves from scribes to experimenters, from speculation to demonstration. You feel the thrill of truth uncovered by reason. You learn that nature obeys patterns, that mathematics can describe the wind and the waves. You build instruments, you measure, you record, you doubt. Authority shifts from tradition to evidence. Clergy, monarchs, and scholars clash over who owns truth. You stand amid heated debates, torn between reverence for history and hunger for discovery. Each rebirth here carries risk, ostracism, imprisonment, even death. Yet you persist. You sense that knowledge, once confined to the elite, is spreading like light through stained glass, illuminating the corners of human ignorance. Throughout these lives, you witness the rise of printing presses, bronze and iron beasts with moving type. Words, once laboriously copied by hand, now race across borders on paper wings. In one life, you operate a press in Mainz. In another, you read a pamphlet in Krakow days after it was printed. Ideas flood cities and countrysides alike. Reformers distribute tracts by cartload. Poets and philosophers reach wider audiences than ever before. Literacy spreads awkwardly. Some rejoice, others fear the flood of opinion. You stand at the threshold of mass communication, feeling its power to unite and to inflame. In markets, you debate politics with strangers. In taverns, you recite verses that challenge hierarchies. You see that the printed word can topple thrones or inspire revolutions. You glimpse a future where ideas outlive empires. This revolution, born of ink and press, becomes the engine that propels you toward new horizons. In subsequent lifetimes, you join voyages venturing across unfamiliar seas. You sail with Portuguese explorers charting the coast of Africa, watching caravels slip beyond known maps. You endure cramped quarters, storms that crack timbers, the taste of salt and fear. You witness the first distant glimpses of India's shores and return with spices that ignite Europe's imagination. In another life, you navigate the Canaries, then the Azores, then the Caribbean. You see lush islands untouched by iron or steel, inhabited by people whose cultures you can scarcely fathom. You trade trinkets and steel blades. You record flora and fauna unknown to old-world herbals. Each discovery thrills and unnerves you. You sense that the globe is shrinking and ready to be carved into colonies. You watch as empires dispatch fleets to claim distant lands. You realize that the age of exploration is also the age of conquest, where maps become tools of dominion and not merely knowledge. As silver and gold flood European ports, you feel the surge of wealth and inflation in your own life. In one incarnation, you are a merchant counting ducats. In another, you are a peasant watching prices soar while wages stagnate. You stand between extremes. Feasts financed by foreign silver and famines sparked by poor harvests. You see economies grow beyond feudal bounds, shaping classes and conflicts anew. Banking houses rise in Venice, Antwerp, Amsterdam. You help calculate interest rates, you write ledgers in Gothic script. Finance becomes a force as potent as armies, enabling expeditions and fueling wars. Merchants become princes, and the line between commerce and sovereignty blurs. You learn that money, like ideas, travels swiftly, and that it can liberate or oppress. With each life, you feel economies weaving a global tapestry, even as local communities strain under its complexity. In other rebirths, you live amid the splendor of courts where art, music, and architecture flourish. You walk beneath the vaults of St. Peter's Basilica, feeling its weight and its wonder. You compose madrigals in darkened chambers. You carve fountains that water grand plazas. Patronage becomes a dialogue between ruler and creator, sometimes collaborative, sometimes coercive. You are uplifted by beauty and unsettled by the costs paid in labor and faith. You see that culture can be both soft power and spectacle. You witness the intricate dance of diplomacy conducted through gifts of art and architecture. In some lives, you survive intrigues in shadowed corridors. In others, you celebrate triumphs in grand ballrooms. You learn that nations forge identities in stone and song just as much as they do in laws and armies. You feel the pulse of nations being shaped by brushes and chisels as much as by swords. But alongside Renaissance splendors and reformist zeal, you experience brutal wars tearing through Europe. In one life, you fight under pikes and muskets in a conflict sparked by faith. In another, you lead peasants driven by hunger and hope into pitched battles. You see castles razed and villages looted. You carry letters promising peace, only to watch them fail. You live through the 30 Years' War's ruin, the brutality of mercenaries, the spread of famine and disease. You realize that nation-states often coalesce through conflict as much as through cooperation. Borders shift, dynasties rise and fall, populations are displaced. You sense that the world, once fragmented, is consolidating, and that unity often demands sacrifice. You carry scars from these lifetimes. Broken bones, broken alliances, broken faith in humanity. Yet you also carry lessons about resilience and reconstruction. In quieter incarnations, you become a scientist, a philosopher, or an engineer applying newfound knowledge to reshape societies. You help design aqueducts in Vienna, or blast tunnels through alpine passes, or chart the fundamentals of physics on chalkboards. You see the first prototypes of instruments that will one day power industry. You debate natural rights and governance, composes treatises whispering the seeds of enlightenment. In some lives, your theories ignite revolutions of thought more explosive than any cannon. In others, they fizzle as heresy. Through it all, you sense that reason is becoming the forge for new nations, nations defined not by shared bloodlines alone, but by shared principles. You help draft constitutions, you teach citizens to question, you shape public spheres where debate replaces decree. You glimpse a future where power is not only in monarchs' hands, but in the will of the people. In your final life of this chapter, you stand on the deck of a steam frigate, watching billows of coal smoke billow against a twilight sky. You feel the transition from sail to steam, from silk to steel, from isolated kingdoms to burgeoning federations. You touch a telegraph key and send pulses across wires strung through forests and across oceans. You watch as news travels faster than armies and ideas leap continents in seconds. You sense that the age you helped forge in this chapter, of art reborn, faith reformed, science awakened, and exploration unleashed, has given birth to modern states. Yet even as you rise into this new world, you feel its tremors. Revolutions that will topple thrones, ideologies that will clash in cataclysms, technologies that will reshape every life. You understand that the forge of nations never cools. It smolders, ready to flare again. And as you close your eyes one last time in this life, you know the world is poised on a knife's edge between hope and ruin, progress and peril. Chapter 6: Fires of Progress. You awaken in a whirlwind of smoke and steel, the air thick with the hiss of steam engines and the clang of metal against metal. A factory looms before you, its chimney spouting soot into a gray sky. In this life, you lace your boots and clock in before dawn, your lungs burning as you feed coal into the belly of a boiler. You learn to navigate the tangled maze of gears and belts, each turn of the crank propelling the world forward. In another life, you stand atop a locomotive, whistle shrieking as iron wheels bite into iron rails, linking distant cities at speeds your ancestors never dreamed. You ride the crest of progress and feel its tremors in every rivet and rail. Though the promise of abundance glimmers on the horizon, you cannot ignore the cost. Rivers blackened with waste, families torn apart by endless shifts, and children whose laughter is replaced by the clatter of machinery. In successive lives, you find yourself in crowded tenements where life clings to damp walls and thin mattresses. You wake each morning to the cries of street vendors and the weight of hunger pressing on your chest. In one incarnation, you hustle through alleyways as a newsboy, hawking papers that herald new inventions and stock market booms. In another, you kneel beside a cot where a child coughs through the night, her ribs rising and falling in a ragged rhythm. Disease spreads like wildfire through these cramped quarters. You learn the names of cholera and tuberculosis, of typhoid and influenza. The very air you breathe becomes laden with unseen threats. Yet amid the squalor, communities form. Neighbors share meager coal, patch-torn clothing, and raise alarms when children vanish into factories. You begin to understand how progress can leave shadows longer than its light. You are reborn as a telegraph operator, your fingers flying across brass keys that send sparks of meaning through copper wires. In one life, you connect distant towns with a code of dots and dashes. In another, you trace the first transcontinental lines that stitch a continent together. You feel the thrill of instantaneous communication, the pulse of urgency, the way news of distant tragedies or triumphs arrives in real time. Railroads follow, their tracks forging new arteries for commerce and migration. You watch as frontiers shrink and cities swell. You meet strangers who speak your language yet bear unfamiliar faces. Each journey recorded in brief telegrams that cost a fortune but shape destinies. You begin to see that speed itself is transforming society, accelerating ideas, markets, and conflicts alike. The world hums with energy, but you sense that power harnessed too quickly can become uncontrollable. In other lives, you ride the crest of worker solidarity. You organize strikes in smoky halls, demanding fair wages and safe conditions. You chalk slogans on walls, rally crowds outside massive gates, and clash with police batons and bayonets. You taste the bitter tang of tear gas and inhale the fervor of collective hope. In yet another life, you are a mill owner, calculating profits in ledgers while dismissing the pleas of dock workers. You justify long hours as necessary sacrifices for national strength. You realize that progress without justice fractures society. You see factories burn in riots sparked by hunger and despair. You watch legislation pass too slowly, leaving momentum to boil over. Through these lives, you learn that industry requires more than coal and steel. It needs compassion, rights, and recognition of human worth. The fires of progress consume both dreams and bodies, and you carry the scars of both. Then the thunder of worldwide conflict rolls in. In one life, you wear a uniform in muddy trenches where barbed wire and shell craters shape a new hell. You rise at dawn to the staccato of machine guns and the wail of howitzers. You learn to move as one with your comrades, to treat wounds with torn cloth and whiskey, to count the days in letters home. In another life, you pilot a biplane along the Western Front, chasing drifting clouds to drop explosives on enemy lines. You witness the sky turn red with flak. You return to base with adrenaline and guilt intertwined. You sense the world unrecognizable, a testament to technology turned toward destruction. When the armistice arrives, you walk through shell-torn villages, stepping over the debris of progress gone awry. You see that the same engines that power factories can roar as engines of war, and you mourn those lives lost to ambition and error. You live through the silent spread of an unseen enemy in the years after the guns fall silent. You are born into crowded hospitals where doctors in masks move like specters among rows of fevered faces. In one incarnation, you comfort a nurse holding a child propped against an four-pole. In another, you are that child, shivering in delirium as violet lamps fight invisible invaders. The influenza pandemic sweeps continents, reminding humankind of its fragility. Soon after, you awaken to a world trying to dance again. Jazz notes drifting from smoky clubs, flappers spinning through lamplit ballrooms, skyscrapers punching into cloud-streaked skies. You taste optimism and excess in every cocktail. But hope sours as stock markets crash, banks shutter, and breadlines stretch. You wake to another kind of hunger, one that homespun soup kitchens and bread riots cannot fully soothe. You learn that cycles of boom and bust often follow one another, each shaping the next with fresh wounds. In successive lives, you see the world descend into a deeper chaos. You stand in the rubble of invaded cities, your uniform swapped for refugee clothes. You hear the rumble of tanks on cobblestones and the shriek of bombers overhead. You navigate blackout streets lit by searchlights, bracing as anti-aircraft artillery shudders through the night. You join resistance cells in secret basements, forging documents and hiding families. In another life, you are a commander in a far-off desert, charting vast dunes in olive-green robes. You coordinate convoys, supply lines, and code-breaking operations. You awake to the first atomic dawn in New Mexico's desert, a blinding flash that redefines power. You grasp that technology now wields the capacity to annihilate whole cities in seconds. You feel the weight of this knowledge in your bones, knowing that the fires of progress can burn entire civilizations. You awaken next into uneasy peace. You train as a diplomat in conference halls burdened with post-war treaties. You negotiate borders carved by distant powers and witness the birth of new nations from old empires' ashes. In another lifetime, you listen to radio broadcasts drifting across the Iron Curtain, voices in static urging unity or casting suspicion. You feel the Cold War's chill settle into everyday life. You watch proxy wars rage in jungles and deserts you've never seen under flags you've hardly heard. You alert authorities to espionage and endure nightly air raid drills. You sample the thrill of rocket launches and the panic of missile crises. Technology connects the world globally, but suspicion fractures it locally. You live through the tension of knowing that destruction sits a button press away, and you learn that peace demands constant vigilance and diplomacy. In quieter incarnations, you become an engineer designing highways that slice through valleys and marshes, bringing cars from coast to coast. You help build airports where jetliners replace propellers, whisking passengers across oceans in hours. You install telephone networks, coax satellite dishes onto rooftops, and lay undersea cables that thread continents. You are reborn as a teacher explaining global geopolitics to classrooms of eager children. You are born again as a host in a television studio, broadcasting images of distant conflicts and cultural revolutions into millions of living rooms. You feel the pulse of connectivity transform human perception. News no longer trickles, it torrents. If places and peoples once felt remote, they now intrude on daily consciousness. You carry both wonder and anxiety at a world shrinking under the weight of instant information. Your final life in this chapter is marked by cautious hope and deep uncertainty. You stand in a modern city where factories hum with automation and smokestacks have receded or turned to scrubbers. You hold a smartphone that can summon images and voices worldwide, and you touch a computer screen that holds libraries of knowledge in pixels. You feel the aftershocks of global conflicts that redraw maps and allegiances. You sense movements for rights and justice rising from street corners to social media feeds. You feel the planet's fever under relentless consumption and the stirrings of collective action for its healing. As your body rests beneath neon lights in a world connected by wire and wave, you know the fires of progress burn on, bright, hot, unpredictable. And you wonder what you, in your next life, will carry forward from these embers. Chapter 7: Threads of Tomorrow. You awaken in a room bathed by LED light reflecting off polished metal surfaces. The hum of servers pulses like distant thunder beneath a raised floor. Your hands hover over a sleek keyboard that responds to touch with gentle clicks. You are reborn in an age shaped by personal computers that nestle into every home. In one life, you type lines of code that unlock new functions in hidden protocols. In another life, you navigate graphical interfaces that translate binary into images and words. You watch as monitors flicker to life, displaying data drawn from worlds beyond these walls. This digital dawn is built on silicon and electricity, yet shaped by human curiosity. You sense that the interface between mind and machine is now a bridge to infinity. The boundaries between user and device blur as your next life awaits connection. In successive lifetimes, you witness the birth of the Internet, a web spun from copper wires and packet-switched networks. In one incarnation, you hear the screech of a dial-up modem connecting you to a nascent world of discussion forums and email. In another, you configure routers that direct traffic through labyrinthine servers, carrying voice and video in milliseconds. You watch as websites bloom like digital gardens, each hyperlink a pathway to new knowledge and community. The world compresses, distance evaporates. Conversations with strangers in distant lands become as intimate as whispers beside a campfire. Data centers rise in quiet fields, humming with endless stacks of blinking lights. You learn that information is power, that access is privilege, and that connectivity reshapes economies and cultures alike. You ride the tidal wave of innovation, feeling both exhilaration and trepidation at how swiftly society transforms. You are reborn into a world of social media, where identity is curated through profiles and feeds. In one life, you scroll through endless streams of images and opinions, forging connections and sparking debates. In another, you design algorithms that learn preferences and tailor content to individual tastes. You see how virality can amplify voices once unheard, but also how it can spread misinformation like wildfire. Movements coalesce online, assembling in digital squares before marching into physical streets. Brands cultivate communities with targeted messaging. Relationships blossom and wither in milliseconds. You sense that the sharing of stories has become both collective ritual and individual performance. Each post, tweet, and reaction becomes a thread woven into the vast tapestry of human discourse. You feel the thrill of digital solidarity and the shadow of echo chambers where unseen walls divide rather than unite. In other lives, you hold a smartphone that glows with possibility in your palm. You navigate touchscreens with flicks and swipes, summoning maps, cameras, and endless streams of information. You wake to notifications and fall asleep to silent vibrations. In one incarnation, you use GPS to guide you through unfamiliar streets. In another, you video chat with friends across time zones, sharing laughter as if no distance existed. You experiment with augmented reality filters that overlay fantasies onto mundane scenes. You track your health and pulse, your steps and sleep patterns, embedding data deep into every moment. The phone becomes a prosthetic extension of memory and identity. You sense that this constant companion is also a tether, linking you to networks of influence that shape desires and beliefs. The world is always within reach, yet always demanding more attention than you possess. You are reborn again amidst talk of artificial intelligence, where machines learn patterns and predict outcomes. In one life, you train neural networks on vast datasets, teaching them to recognize faces, translate languages, or diagnose diseases. In another, you witness AI assistants responding in human voices, scheduling meetings, composing messages, and even writing art. You marvel at creativity emerging from algorithms, yet you question authorship and agency. You observe factories where robots weld car frames with unfaltering precision. You see financial markets driven by automated trading bots executing orders in microseconds. You sense an intelligence outside your own forming around you, a partner, sometimes a rival. You feel both awe and unease as AI integrates into healthcare, law, and warfare. These systems learn from humanity's strengths and flaws, amplifying both. You carry the paradox of progress, extraordinary potential entwined with existential risk. In further lives, you delve into biotechnology and genome editing, holding the power to rewrite the code of life itself. You are reborn as a researcher in a sterile lab, pipettes in hand, splicing genes to cure diseases once fatal. In another incarnation, you observe the first designer babies born with edited traits. You understand the promise: endurance against illness, resilience against pathogens, perhaps even delayed aging. Yet you also feel the weight of ethical dilemmas: who decides which genes to change, and whose lives are deemed worthy. You witness organisms engineered to consume plastic or produce biofuels, touching ecosystems in unpredictable ways. You sense that the boundary between natural and synthetic life is dissolving. You carry wonder at humanity's growing mastery over biology, along with caution that altering genomes could ripple through generations. The thread of life itself is now in human hands, and its tapestry grows ever more intricate and fragile. You awake next amidst global awareness of a warming planet and shifting climates. In one life, you join scientists measuring polar ice thickness with satellite data. In another, you plant trees in deforested regions, striving to heal scars left by centuries of exploitation. You witness storms intensifying, sea levels rising, ecosystems collapsing. You see climate migrants crossing borders in search of refuge. You participate in summits where leaders negotiate emissions targets and green technologies. You ride electric vehicles powered by renewable energy grids. You develop materials that absorb carbon from air or buildings that breathe. You sense that collective action is essential, yet mired in competing interests and short timelines. You feel urgency pulsing through each iteration of your soul. The elemental forces of nature are converging with human choice, decision points that will echo for millennia. You understand that survival depends on threads woven between science, policy, and individual behavior. In other lives, you witness the rise of remote work and virtual collaboration. You become a digital nomad in one incarnation, coding from a beachside bungalow as the sun sets over turquoise waves. In another, you host holographic meetings from a high-rise office overlooking a neon-lit metropolis. You see education transformed by online classrooms, where teachers and students connect through screens and avatars. You feel the freedom of decoupling work from location and the loneliness of homes turned into offices. You watch industries adapt to pandemics by shifting commerce online, reshaping retail, entertainment, and healthcare. You sense that proximity is no longer prerequisite for cooperation. The workplace becomes a network of global nodes, sometimes cohesive, sometimes fragmented. You carry the insight that technology can bridge distances, but cannot replace human presence entirely. The future of work unfolds in waves of innovation and reflection. In successive rebirths, you explore frontiers once imagined only in science fiction. You become an astronaut living aboard a rotating habitation module in orbit, watching Earth's curvature whisper fragility. In another incarnation, you command autonomous drones mapping the ocean floor or surveying distant planets. You program quantum computers that tackle problems classical machines cannot fathom. You interface with brain-computer implants that blur the line between thought and command. You develop nanobots that patrol bloodstreams, healing from within. You see possibilities that stretch beyond biology and gravity. Yet with every leap, you sense the specter of unintended consequences, cosmic contamination, digital vulnerabilities, existential questions about what it means to be human. You carry the exhilaration of infinite possibility tempered by the humility of being one thread in a cosmos you barely comprehend. In your final life of this chapter, you find yourself in a world scarred by past choices, yet pulsing with potential. You stand in a circular amphitheater built of reclaimed materials, listening to voices from all corners of the planet through a real-time translation array. You hear proposals for equitable energy systems, decentralized governance models, and collaborative AI ethics councils. You smell the scent of community gardens thriving on urban rooftops. You taste water purified by novel membranes, grown by labs and distributed free to neighboring villages. You feel children learning coding alongside cultural traditions in blended curricula. Patterns you first glimpsed as a Stone Age hunter have converged into networks that span oceans, forests, and even orbit. You sense that every past life, each discovery, conflict, triumph, and error has led to this nexus. You stand on the threshold between histories lived and futures yet imagined. Now the question returns, how will you shape the future, for the countless lives still to come.